Meghan Markle desperately trying to rebrand herself after realizing in the UK how much she is failing and the royal family is thriving. So she is desperately trying to make herself somewhat more likable in light of Queen Elizabeth's death. Hello everyone, welcome to Rebranding News Network. My name is Brittany and today we are talking about, yes, oh yes, that interview with Variety that dropped. And we knew it was coming because they had said they were giving this award and she would be on the cover. I was not expecting her to be portrayed as a saint on the cover. I thought that was a little much. It's also extremely like her portrait in the Cut interview as well. So it's kind of interesting to see these kind of two sides. One is Meghan as saintly and one who looks kind of conniving and malicious or something like that. She has kind of this aggressive pose and this serene pose. So I think it begs the question, who is the real Meghan Markle? Is it the conniving woman we see in the Cut, or is this saintly woman in Variety? You know what? I'm not entirely sure. And that's because I think pretty much everything we've seen her doing since walking onto the international stage has been to a certain extent a contrivance and a performance. And because of that, she changes it constantly based on what she thinks people want or need, or what she thinks will help get her to this position that she wants to be in. The problem with that is that people don't connect to you because there's nothing real, because you're constantly changing. So we'll go over a little bit of that today in this video, and I'll explain kind of why I think that way and perhaps why Meghan is, I think, spiraling, and how perhaps the original interview she did with Variety for this issue was probably very different than what she did post the Queen's death. Realizing all of a sudden, man, our brand is tanking. We cannot compete with the royals anymore. We could barely get through the funeral and we were maligned basically almost the entire time. So I think Meghan is really struggling with that. But if you guys haven't been here before, my name is Brittany and I provide compelling royal commentary on the latest news and gossip. I also will review television shows and movies and cover a bit of history as well. So if you guys want to subscribe, that would be fantastic. And I can tell you who would really appreciate that. But it's my dog Pippa. Yes. She would love it if you would subscribe. It would make her so unbelievably happy. Yeah. Okay. Okay, hi. Do you want to hang up here for a minute? Okay, we'll do that. Okay, but you have to come over on this side because the mic's over there. Okay, there we go. There we go. There we go. If you also love royal fashion, especially if right now you need a bit of cleanse from Harry and Meghan, feel free to go over to Royal Fashion News. On that channel, it is mostly Meghan free, I can say, and it covers, I had just did a video on Kiara's 101 explaining the different styles, gemstone, a bit of the history too. So if you guys want to go ahead and check that out, I'll put that link in the description down below. And I do have a couple of exciting videos coming up. I'm going to be planning on doing one covering the Wales' life in Windsor. And then I'm also going to be doing one because so many of you guys on Instagram commented on it and I was a bit surprised. We'll be doing a little bit of story on the two princes. So this is Edward and I believe Richard, the two princes who disappeared in the Tower of London. So we'll be doing a bit of video and a bit of a history deep dive on that because there's thoughts that maybe they will finally do some DNA testing and find out if they have two pairs of remains that they think could be the brothers. And we will find out which one that is. But oh guys, this Variety interview. And I gotta give mad props to Daily Mail. They chose some of the worst shots from her video. Like some of the worst shots to put in their article. And I was like, ooh, ouch, that's gotta hurt. Pretty much all of them looked really unflattering. And I think part of it too is if you watch the video, which I'll show a bit of, is she's trying so hard that she's over exaggerating all of her facial expressions, I feel like. And so it looks very contrived anytime you get a still shot of her because she's going, it looks very contrived. And it could be, again, something totally natural, but even in her interview, she's grinning sometimes so hard. I can't tell if she's really that excited or if she's overdoing it because she's trying to appear so likable. So I think this article basically is damage control from the awful interview she did in the Cut, which I think is more real Meghan because she was not portrayed well in that at all. And really she only has herself to blame. And we'll go over her comments on that because it's really quite telling, but it's very interesting, I think, that she's trying to all of a sudden rebrand. There is a anonymous account related to a PR executive who says that it looks like this interview was much more well managed for Meghan and she came out of it looking much better. And I would generally overall agree with that. But in terms of the presentations, and that's because really the writer couldn't add any commentary because it was all question and answers, which I always feel like is a cop-out when it comes to writing an article, because I used to do those kind of things. And so I just did think that was kind of interesting, but allows her a bit more to control the narrative. But at the same time, also you have the same issues where Meghan's narcissism and self-delusion is growing to such an extent that she's trying so hard to be likable, because her interview in The Cut made her sound delusional, that she's starting to try to be more likable, but she's trying so hard that it doesn't make a ton of sense. So let's jump into it. And I just thought a little bit of this first paragraph, I'm like, oh, come on, guys. I really don't think that's really what's going on here, but here, let's go. The Duchess of Sussex is in mourning, but we'll get back to that. First, let's go to the day we met this past summer at the venerated San Ysidro Ranch in Montecito, California. The ranch is a low-key old luxury resort with simple bungalows tucked into a mountainside overlooking the Pacific coast. It's the kind of unpretentious but protected place wealthy locals and LA transplants come to be treated like royalty. On one withering hot day in late August, however, they got to mingle with the real thing. Guys, she was only actually a working member of the royal family for about 18 months. That's it. That is it. She got to go to the funeral, and she'll probably get to go to the coronation, but that's pretty much it. Basically, they've been shuffled off to the side, and King Charles told them, enjoy yourselves, have at it. But yeah, we don't need you anymore. We don't really want you anymore. But this idea that they're all, oh, so awed by Meghan. I feel like we get that throughout here. And I'm just like, it's hard not to roll your eyes, because it's like, oh, come on now. She's not that impressive, really. And she only has the title by association. That's it. This idea that everybody faints at the sight of Meghan is a little much. He goes on, that morning, the Duchess of Sussex, known more commonly by her maiden name Meghan Markle, sped past a group of 60-something women who'd made the trek to Montecito to celebrate a milestone birthday. Teetering on the dusty cobblestones walkways in their wedges and kitten heels, the group stopped dead as Meghan waved and smiled from a golf cart, delivering her to her variety cover shoot. Can you imagine, said one of the women wistfully, after the Duchess had paused, perhaps talking about the life she had led thus far, an American woman meeting and marrying a handsome young prince beloved by all the world, and maybe, as we were there to discuss, the life she's leading now. That's just so ridiculous. That's so ridiculous. They stopped dead in their tracks. They were so wistfully say, can you imagine a Duchess of America who only spent 18 months in the UK and isn't really welcomed by the family, can't even get her kids titles. There's talk of them stripping those titles. Yeah, I mean, everybody's super impressed. Really, really impressed. I think that's kind of weird. I mean, because you can also read it. Can you imagine? It's like, can you imagine the gall of this woman having another magazine cover after that disastrous interview with The Cut? I think that would be my thought. But hey, that's just me. And you just get the impression that Meghan just wants to go everywhere and just do this and this. Oh, look at everybody. Look at me. Aren't I so special? Look at me. And again, it's just it feels again very much not natural, because we know that Kate and William go to pubs and different things, and they're not just expecting people to walk by and be so odd that they, you know, that they waved at them or something. It just feels more natural when the other royals are out and about. I mean, really the person who I'd be like in awe of is Grace Kelly. And, you know, like right after she had married Prince Rainier, that would be like a true royalty sighting. Meghan, not so much. The woman has, again, her association with the monarchy at this point is so peripheral that it's to lean on it so much, again, goes to show that they have nothing else to sell. It's actually hard to imagine for most of her public life as the Duchess of Sussex. Meghan has been described as many things: disingenuous, calculating, determined, relatable, even Diana-like. The only person who said that is her husband and her PR team. Those are the only people who said that. She has nothing in common with Diana except for absolute worst qualities. Everybody who Harry introduced her to thought the exact same way, pretty much. He kept going, she's the next Diana. And everybody goes, are you mental? No. But again, Harry's too dense, I think. But spend a day with her and you'll witness a side that the public hasn't seen. The nerdy American mom. Meghan talks about how she loves to watch Jeopardy and do Wordle in bed with a glass of wine. She absent-mindedly raps her son's favorite song, a track about the Tyrannosaurus Rex from Ask the Storybots, and talks enthusiastically about Beyonce, specifically how Cozy is her favorite song from the new album. So this is where we can definitely see the rebranding beginning, especially the nerdy American mom. So actually pretty positive if I remember correctly, because I did listen to it yesterday and it was rough going, that she described herself as also a nerd in her interview with Paris Hilton. And I'm like, I feel like we haven't seen you describe yourself that way before. So I did just do a quick Google search, and what I did is I put in parameters saying from 2010 to 2022, so January 2010 to January 2022, when did Meghan reference herself as a nerd? Well, apparently the only time was supposedly in college when she called herself a theater nerd, who, I mean, can you think of one time we even have heard of Meghan going to a play in a while? I haven't heard her doing that in the slightest. I don't really think she's all that much of a theater nerd, because if she was, she would actually have tried to do theater rather than just trying to be on something like Suits. So I feel like it's this kind of nerding her out, trying to make her sound smart and kind of engaging, trying to maybe hit a bit of that Big Bang Theory mentality where like nerds are adorable and lovable, but you actually have to be a nerd about something. I'm a nerd about royals. I'm a nerd about history. I am a bit of a nerd, and I love like movies and television shows and those sorts of things. So I feel like I am a nerd, and I feel like I've described myself a bit like that before. Maybe not on here, but like in personal interactions. But I feel like this reframing herself as a nerd is something new she's kind of desperate to try to do. Because I feel like, again, she thinks it makes her sound more relatable than it actually does. She's like, I do Wordle. I watch Jeopardy, you know, which also my almost 90-year-old grandfather does. She's just like us, guys. She's just like us. And that's what she's also trying to tell us. Look, I'm just like you. I'm just the nerdy American mom. Don't worry about it. And again, it's like, but you have a staff, you have this massive mansion, you have full-time security, your father-in-law is the King of England, like, you're not really like us. And this, again, trying to reframe this narrative, I feel like just doesn't quite work, because we know what has gone on behind the scenes when she was a royal, which was that she was rather nasty piece of work. And that really has continued, because we've seen pretty much a pretty good exodus of employees from Archewell. Basically, they last a couple months to a year and then they're out. They're out. So I feel like none of that has stopped, but she's trying, because she realized the monarchy is still as popular as it was, if not more, after the Queen Elizabeth died, that she's like, okay, well, we've got to compete with them. Let's show us, let's normalize ourselves, Harry. You know, in her $10,000 Cartier watch and love bracelet, we're going to rebrand ourselves while she's wearing couture things. It just doesn't totally work. And what about all the photos you've seen of her with that guarded smile? At the shoot, she couldn't have been more at ease as she shook the hand of every crew member, stylist, and photographer's assistant. So this is, again, where she's showing that, oh, she's nice to the staff members. Look, she shook everybody's hand. She's so kind. Again, she's trying to rebrand, trying to push back from that bullying narrative. But here's the thing. Yes, peripherally, in a moment, she's nice to staff members, but if you actually work for her, we've been heard many times she's not a pleasant person to actually have as your boss. So those people, she wants something from them. So of course she's going to be nice to them. She wants something from them. She wants to look good. She wants the profile to do well, because her profile with the cut ended very badly for her. So again, she's trying to do damage control. And I guess if you believe it, sure. But again, I'm to a certain extent a cynical person, and I know this is one day, one interaction. What really matters is how those one interactions do matter. You need to be nice to waiters and service staff members and those sorts of things, absolutely. But what does matter is how you treat people day after day after day. That's what really matters. Not just an acquaintance. How do you really treat people? That's the true test of your character. She addressed questions about the past few years head on. She burst out laughing at a drop of a hat, almost like a princess in a Hollywood movie. When asked what she wanted most out of life, she said, joy. That's really it. It's everything that we can work towards for ourselves, our friends, and our kids, those around us, that we would feel good and we do feel joyful. Well, I noticed very, very specifically, automatically, that you didn't mention family there. So it's only about friends and your kids. And I get it, a lot of people do have to make their friend group kind of their family. But I also feel like to a certain extent that can be used as a cop-out not to deal with the real people who know you, who've known you since birth, really do know everything about you, because your friends, to a certain extent, you can drop them when they become inconvenient, when they start asking too many questions, when they're not groveling at your feet. You can just drop them. So I feel like, to me, that's very, very telling that she doesn't include family there. So she still very much hates the monarchy, hates the royal family, hates everything they stand for, because again, they did not make her Queen Meghan. You gotta make her Queen Meghan. If you do, she'll be fine. She'll be fine, guys. And I feel like too, Meghan is very much into this vision of herself as this Hollywood princess, not a real princess. She never spent enough time in the UK to understand what being a princess actually meant. She never spent enough time to really get to know the UK people, the title that she carries. Again, if she could point Sussex out on a map to me, I'd be shocked. And she could tell me anything about Sussex, perhaps beyond where it is on the map, I'd be totally shocked, because I don't think she gives two craps about the UK. I really, really don't. She does not care. She wanted the title, she wanted the fame and fortune, so she could finally fulfill her Hollywood dream. And now even she's a princess on top of that, in her own mind. So, and again, it shows also as well this naivete and this ignorance that a lot of Americans have of what a princess actually is. It's not somebody who's promoting themselves, going to events. It's somebody who works, does things that are not glamorous, does things that oftentimes are thankless, but they do them anyways. And sometimes then you get to wear jewelry worth millions of dollars if you bide your time well, which Meghan didn't. So she was honored with this award for variety, and of course, she was about to get the award, and I'm sure she was so crushed that she couldn't accept it herself. And then the Queen died, and Meghan says the Queen is a shining example. And I love this next bit, because again, it's like, well, she was a shining example of female leadership, but you never spent any time with her in her last couple of years of life. As soon as you bolted out to California, you would not visit unless you could bring a camera crew with you. So I'm sorry, but I just find your statements about the Queen to be incredibly, incredibly disingenuous. So it goes on to say, and this is critical, I think. Following the official period of mourning, Meghan agrees to sit again for a lengthy discussion about her road to the present. She worries that any comments about the Queen or her in-laws will be a distraction from continued mourning, but presses on to celebrate the icon. She grows animated talking about the warmth and support she received from the thousands of citizens she interacted with during her time in the UK. Not to mention the two significant content deals she and Harry struck with streaming giants Netflix and Spotify. I love how they pivot between those two ideas, which are very, very distinct and different. Also, I gotta say, Meghan, they weren't there and they weren't comforting and supporting you, not you individually, the family, which you are a peripheral member of. I feel like she thinks everybody's, oh, they're all there for her. Like, no, honey, they're not there for you. And I don't think she met thousands of people. She maybe met hundreds of people in that one walkabout, but she did not meet thousands of people, because I think they were kept under pretty much lock and key the whole time. And they were not allowed to interact with many people, especially like the foreign royals, dignitaries. They're like, okay, Harry and Meghan, here you go. Bums out the door, come on. Archie Harrison, 3, and Lilibet Diana, 1. At the center of the Sussex household, the singular mission behind Archewell and how tenaciously she has fought to build the life and company of her dreams. She's a dreamer, guys. She's a dreamer. So she was asked, the world has been mourning the loss of Queen Elizabeth. How has this time been? She says, there's been such an outpouring of love and support, and I'm really grateful that I was able to be with my husband to support him, especially during that time. What's so beautiful is to have to look at the legacy that his grandmother was able to leave on so many fronts. Certainly in terms of female leadership, she is the most shining example of what that looks like. I feel deep gratitude to have been able to spend time with her and to get to know her. It's been a complicated time, but my husband, ever the optimist, said, now she's reunited with her husband. You could say Philip, not just her husband. Again, when they made the statement about the Queen's death on their website, it felt very clinical. They said like her husband instead of, my grandfather, Prince Philip. It's like, you can say Philip. That she was reunited with Philip, I think to me sounds more natural than her husband, which I feel like denigrates Philip. But I feel like, again, that's very much Meghan's brand of femininity, or sorry, I shouldn't say femininity. Feminism is that you must trample on men to be a real feminist. And I totally disagree with that notion. I think it's damaging to children, to young men, to boys, to think of women as somehow better when the sexes are different and equal in value as human beings, yet offer different skill sets that the other doesn't have. That's what makes them such a great combination. And I feel like, again, I would say, I'm so glad she was able to, be reunited with Philip, the love of her life. But I mean, I might say her husband, but I didn't know Philip. I didn't know her. So it feels very clinical for Meghan to say this. She also goes, has anything come up for you in your relationship with the Queen since her passing? I reflected on that first official engagement that I had with her, how special that felt. I feel fortunate, and I continue to be proud to have had a nice warmth with the matriarch of the family. Again, so clinical. She was your husband's grandmother. She was your children's great-grandmother, and you could not even visit her a couple days before she died. They could have been there. They could have even been there the day before she died. But they decided not to. They decided that their own egos, their own stuff was more important than spending time with her. So again, it's like, I don't care, you had this one engagement with her. She gave you a pair of pearl earrings, which Meghan's fans are still like, ooh, look, and Meghan got these rinky-dink pair of pearl earrings. The Queen loved her more. So yeah, well, Catherine will get access to a jewelry collection worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't think she cares about Meghan's earrings. I really don't. And Catherine got to wear a ton of the Queen's jewelry throughout the mourning period and before. So I'm sorry, but yeah, that's that. That dog won't hunt, as they say. But again, it's just one of those things where Meghan is trying to soften her tone towards the royal family because she's felt the tides have shifted and not in her favor. They've asked, you've done 2 major interviews since returning to America, one with Oprah Winfrey and the other with New York Magazine, which some found to be snarky. What has it been like to open up about your life now? The New York story was intended to support Archetypes and focus on our projects. I've had some time to reflect on it. Part of me is just really trusting, really open, and how I move in the world. I have to remember that I don't ever want to be someone so jaded that that piece of me goes away. So despite any of those things, onward, I can survive it. So basically, she just threw the author of that interview under the bus. But I thought what the interviewer did, yes, it was very snarky. And I think if Meghan didn't catch on to it, and again, she's one of those people where I think she'll talk to anybody and always be upset about what they said. I think that interview to a certain extent reflected the real Meghan, and that's what she's mad about. Because people saw it's like, the thrones, the crazy story about the kid in the bouncy house, and how she was trying again to sound somewhat relatable, yet sounded so tone deaf, so outside reality, so delusional that the title of my video that I did at the time was Calculated or Crazy, because she honestly sounded kind of unhinged. And I think she also must have caught on to the fact of, because she uses my husband in this interview, people caught on to my love thing, that she only calls him my love in person and then H in other instances. So I think people really caught on to the manipulation, and she's like, oh crud, oh crud, oh crud, backtrack. Oh, it wasn't a good interview. Well, it wasn't, but that was kind of on you. Sorry to say. Part of what I'm doing with Archetypes is looking at how the nuances around women who come on the show. I'm not a journalist. Yeah, I knew that. I knew that watching it. You're terrible at interviewing people. Really, really, really bad at it. you're really bad at it. The podcast is pretty bad. But I want a candid, real conversation with them. I'm talking to some really textured, colorful, layered, dynamic women with strong histories, and that comes with a lot of pieces you can choose to include or not. I choose to include something that I feel is fair to them and also uplifting, and something we can all learn from. But again, only if you are a progressive, Democrat, liberal, feminist woman who agrees exactly with Meghan Markle. Maybe you will get something from it. Me, I've gotten diddly squat. Because if it's so also such a vain project for her, that's what this comes back to too. It's a vanity project to try to rehab her image in her own mind, because people just don't get her. If they just spent more time with her, they would understand her. They would get her. But the thing is, Meghan never shows us her true face. So it's just another contrivance. So people, again, have a hard time believing anything she says, because she's created this public perception that what we're always seeing from her is never the truth. And that is what she has to try to fight against, and yet she's still being contrived. So she has to just get rid of her very desperate attempt to try to seem likable and just be herself. Because if you're yourself and you're a decent person, you will eventually become likable. And that's just what happens. I mean, maybe some of you would be me person not think I'm likable. I think I'm pretty likable, but that's just me. I don't really put on any airs because that would be really hard to keep up. And again, I have the penchant for the truth. I like the truth, but that's not Meghan. So I won't read this full answer, but I think this bottom part is really interesting. She was asked about the reaction to the Oprah Winfrey interview. And here's what she said. She went to her next big event that she went to privately was a birthday dinner or something for Gloria Steinman, who is her friend, guys. She's her friend. This is the woman that Meghan was seen guiding to her car in New York City. So she says, walking into a room alone is never easy for me, and I remember feeling a bit uncomfortable. I just find that really hard to believe. I feel like Meghan, again, I think she suffers from extreme narcissism, delusion, and also a deep sense of insecurity. So I can see both, but I also feel like most of the time she's like, I'm a duchess. So she comes in with probably that attitude the vast majority of the time. But before I could let my uncertainty linger, Pamela Adlon came up to me and greeted me with such warmth and kindness. She toured me around the room, and at every turn, more generosity and love was felt. Maybe it's just a testament to the kind of company Glow keeps. So that's Gloria. But I also think these women were extraordinary to ensure I felt so welcomed. All about me and my feelings. It's like they knew exactly what I needed to feel in that moment. It meant and still means so very much to me. The power of sisterhood and female support can never be underestimated. Again, I feel like Meghan, she's a feminist who wants to trample on men. She has no use for men, I don't feel like, really. She uses Harry, but I don't really feel like, and I'll get to this at the very end, I have a sentiment now about their relationship and Meghan's obsession with something. And I'll kind of describe it towards the end. Obsessed with women and feminism and just cares little for men. So she's asked, what can we expect from the Liz Garbus docuseries on you and your husband? She said, it's nice to be able to trust someone with our story, a seasoned director whose work I've long admired, even if it means it may not be the way we would have told it. But that's not why we're telling it. We're trusting our stories to someone else, and that means it will go through their lens. It's interesting. My husband has never worked in the industry before. For me, having worked on Suits, it's so amazing to be around so much creative energy and to see how people work together and share their own points of view. That's been really fun. Okay, hey, you're working on a reality TV series, honey. It's a reality TV series. I don't think there's that much creatively going on. I don't think there's that much. But I just thought it was interesting. She's not happy with whatever they have, or they're not allowed to edit things they wanted to edit. She's not happy. And you know what? That's what happens, Meghan, when you kind of sell your soul for money. That's kind of what happens. And that's what they did. And so guess what? You do have to deal with those consequences. And it does sound like maybe if this is right, some of the other reports were wrong, that their reality show will come out in December and it will not be edited after the Queen's death. So we may get to hear their true thoughts on things, which will be fun. Because again, Netflix doesn't care about Harry and Meghan's family relationships. They don't care about their family dynamics, except for what it can do for them. So if this damages Harry's relationship with his father, Netflix is like, we paid you $10 million so far for this deal. We want this series and we want it to do well. And you know what you say, your father is a terrible dad? we're going to put it in there. We don't care. So that's something Harry and Meghan have to deal with. But of course, they did have their plan for a year-long reconciliation tour, so we'll see how well that goes now. So she's asked about what's the biggest misconception about her. She says, I think that what happens looking in from the outside when there's this much noise is that you become dehumanized. But if you remember that someone is a human being, then you don't treat them, talk about them, look at them the same way. My hope for Archetypes is that people come out thinking, oh, she's a real person. She laughs and asks questions and she approaches things with curiosity. Yeah, but Meghan, you're not really approaching things with curiosity. You're only interviewing people who you deem to be appropriate to interview. Again, I've said, Tulsi Gabbard, who was with the Democratic side, she was kind of a maverick Democrat when she tried to run for president in 2020. Why not interview her? Why not interview Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador? Because see, that to me, including all the other people, so I'm saying from both sides of the political spectrum, like Joe Rogan does, interview women from all sides. Take what perhaps, this would be an example, take a woman, I don't know, who has 12 kids or something. And Meghan could bring her in to talk about what does it feel like when people say, oh, you're representing the patriarchy. Ask her about that. Even though she feels passionately about having as many children as possible, as many children as God allows, why not ask her about that? Meghan is only choosing famous people. And it's because they're a surrogate for her. They're a surrogate for her because this is one gigantic vanity project that she hopes can kind of change the language around about herself. Because in every episode, she has this long monologue about herself. She always brings it back to her own experiences. And for at least most of the episodes, which did not work for the Paris Hilton one, and I think that's why that one was extra bad, is Meghan always brings it around to a conversation about race. So when that didn't work with the Paris Hilton interview, I feel like that one dragged and was just not as tight because she couldn't bring up the thing she really wants to talk about, which is race, race, race. And so she kept asking Paris Hilton all the time, so you're a bimbo. So do people think you're a bimbo still? Do you still do the bimbo, the Barbie, voice and attitude and everything? Do you still do that? She asked those things like a million times because I think she didn't have anything else to ask because she doesn't want to broaden her horizons. She wants to confirm what she's already thinking. She wants somebody to validate her own thoughts. That's why when Mariah Carey said, well, you're a diva, honey, and she didn't really care about the diva label, Meghan kind of had a little meltdown because she hated being called a diva because she couldn't handle that. That can be something you own rather than being something negative. Because we most associate divas with women who are singers, and that's where the term originally came from in the opera. So it does make sense. And I feel like too, Meghan really struggled with the fact that Mariah didn't really care about being called a diva, and that's what Meghan wanted to confirm is that, well, you're a diva. That's bad, right? Well, Mariah wouldn't do that. So to me, that shows a very narrow-minded sense. Because when you're interviewing someone, granted, you want to tell them what you're going to be interviewing them about. And then maybe you throw out one or two kind of popcorn questions that you find kind of interesting. I actually did that once in an interview and I actually got a really interesting response. And I was like, oh, that's not what I was talking to you about at all. But I loved what you just said right there. I was like, thank you. And if you have a great rapport with someone, you can ask those. I haven't ever done anything quite like what Meghan has done. But I just feel like Meghan, again, this whole thing is she wants these people that she's interviewing to reflect her. She wants them to reflect herself. And that's where I think, again, it comes back to this is one thing because she wants to confirm her own bias about herself and what other people think about her. And she's trying to change it, but I don't feel like it's working because she's not open-minded. And when she's on the podcast, she's manipulating her voice so much and doing this every once in a while. And then I think it was Lisa Ling, she goes, I love her. It was just, again, it was one of those things that felt so fake, so scripted, that if she's trying to convey this, she needs to actually have real conversations with people, kind of like Joe Rogan does. Long conversations, no holds barred, anything goes, talk about anything. And I feel like that's more interesting. Or she could still have the archetypes thing, but interview a variety of different women on different topics, not just people you think confirm what you already believe. Because that to me shows a narrow-minded journalist and interviewer, which I mean, Meghan's not a journalist, she said that, but still, she wants to add value to the space. She needs to do more than confirm her own bias. That's also how you do research, by the way. You should have maybe a vague notion of what your results might be, but you let the science, the research dictate the direction you go in. So let's say you're thinking you're going to go this way. Well, what if it starts going this way and then goes that way? Well, you follow where the research takes you. You don't let your bias, your own beliefs dictate that. You let the facts dictate what you're doing. So Meghan's not doing that. So ergo, I don't really think she's living up to her own hype. She also has this whole thing about not being pretty. I'll get into that more in the Paris Hilton, because I do want to do a review of that because I thought that was really interesting. But in general, one of the things I came away thinking is that Meghan is deeply jealous of Paris Hilton. She wanted Paris Hilton's life and she didn't have it. And she really, to a certain extent, does not have it, because Paris Hilton, I'm sure, has a lot more money than she does. When asked if she'll go back to acting, she says, "No, I'm done. I guess never say never, but my intention is to absolutely not." I don't think anybody would hire her. That's part of the problem. I think she would do it, but nobody's going to hire her because she's so divisive. You immediately separate into the audience. And I think now it's more dislike than like. The vast majority of the people, not vast majority, but a majority, I would say, will boycott it just because she's in it. And then you'll get a minority that goes, yay, rah, rah, rah. And I think Hollywood's starting to freak out, seeing how bad movies are doing. They had their worst box office month in 25 years last month. That's pretty bad. So I think Hollywood's like, we're not going to take a risk on someone who can't act. That's the one thing. If Meghan could actually act well, I think she could break free of this kind of negativity to a certain extent. If she could actually show a skill set, I would be impressed. I'd be like, oh, you're working on your craft. You're becoming great. I mean, bravo, good for you. I'm not a fan, but if I see somebody working on something, I'm like, yay. You know, more power to you. But I feel like she refuses to work on anything, is just coasting on her looks, which we'll get back to, of course, because I will have to review that Archetypes episode. I just need to. I didn't get time to yesterday. But if you guys really don't want it, just let me know. So she's asked, going through the process you did with the monarchy and then becoming a private citizen again, are those institutions similar? It's a weird question. And she says, for me, it was always about being able to find your North Star within that model, which she never did. That would have taken time in the monarchy, but she could have followed Camilla's example or Sophie, the Countess of Wessex. That's the example Meghan should have followed, because she's the spare. She was the spare's wife. That would be her life. And granted, probably to her that sucks, but you know, that's better than a lot of other people had it. Do you know who had the most tiaras out of the entire British monarchy? Sophie. Sophie, except for the Queen. Sophie got lent more than anybody else. So sometimes it's not that bad to be the spare's wife, if you have a good relationship with the monarch, whoever is in power. Like Catherine, I think Catherine and Camilla may split the tiaras 50-50. That would be so fun. But they'll never do that with Meghan. If she ever wears a tiara again, I would be pretty shocked, really. Find someone who believes in you. As complex as any organization might be, there is always something in it that I think is positive. It is important to focus on that. Some industries are very different, and yet business models work for a lot of things. They have a bottom line. That bottom line needs to be held, I suppose. So basically her bottom line with the monarchy, her North Star was, we can go to Hollywood. We can go to Hollywood, Harry, and make a bunch of money. That was her North Star. So it turns out you actually need a bit of talent to do that, and we haven't seen any. So, I mean, I hope for her she can finally get something together, because I think the podcast has been bad. The reality TV show, it sounds like it's a hot mess. You know, you need to figure out who you are, Meghan. Stop trying to be what you think people want or what you think you are. Be yourself. Then you might go far. I love this. What is an ideal project for Archewell Productions? Because it's confusing, because Archewell they have their foundation and Archewell Productions. This is funny. So much of how my husband and I see things is through our love story. I think that's what people around the world connected to, especially with our wedding. People love love. I'm not excluded in that sentiment. And our definition of love is really expansive. Partner love, self-love, the love of community and family. Of course, not the monarchy. The monarchy people, they can't love. They can't love, apparently. We use that as the baseline of the kind of shows and documentaries we want out there. For my husband, the Invictus Games has been such a huge piece of his life and his work. Having been in the Army for 10 years and working for the rehabilitation of wounded vets and their families, we talk about emotional injuries that come from those type of experiences. Those are love stories, I guess. I feel like that's a stretch, but for scripted, we want to think about how we can evolve from that same space and do something fun. It doesn't always have to be so serious, like a good rom-com. Don't we miss them? I miss them so much. I've probably watched When Harry Met Sally a million times, and all the Julia Roberts rom-coms. We need to see more of those again. That's just what we need, a Meghan Markle rom-com with her. Oh gosh, I feel like that would be awful because her writing, she thinks she's good at writing, but she could be good, but she needs to cut about half her words down. I would help her. I would be a good editor. I would slash about half of that, make it simple. And I think perhaps maybe her skill could be better used in screenplays, but I really don't think so. But again, it's like, okay, so you want to do rom-coms? Like, what's your idea? How are you going to make things happen? You can't just go, well, we want Julia Roberts and have her drop everything to be in your rom-com. It has to be good. I'm actually, the one with her and George Clooney looks interesting. I'm just always very, very careful because I hate the woke agenda. I hate wokeness in films because it destroys story because they're trying so hard. They're making it so convoluted. The story doesn't make sense because you have to hit all the woke talking points that the story is non-existent or it just doesn't flat out doesn't make any sense. So that's like, but again, it's like, well, have you shown it? Like, you acted in Hallmark films. I would love to see, if you can do that, great, but it's just, I feel like she's just throwing that out there going, I love rom-coms. I love Harry Met Sally. Isn't that great? Like, that's fine. I mean, everybody here tells me you look like Meg Ryan, which I find a really compliment because she was America's sweetheart. So I find that really awesome, but you know, it's to learn writing and editing. I mean, just doing these takes a while. It takes a while. This video will probably, I have all the clips taken out, but I may add pictures to them. I may not, because adding the pictures makes it take longer. But this is not like a smooth process. This takes a while. It's not easy at all, but I enjoy it. It takes time, but you have to learn it. And I feel like Meghan, even though she says she has a curiosity, part of that is actually learning a new skill. I feel like that's not her best thing. Anything you don't want on your slate? I don't think we'll do a horror movie. And here is it. Charles, no titles for the kids. This statement, no titles, no bueno. Tell the Harry and Meghan, absolutely not. Because she says this, what would you say if one of your kids came to you in 10 or 15 years and said, I want a career in entertainment? I would say, great. When you become a parent, you generally want your kids to find the things that bring them complete joy. They're our kids, obviously, and they're part of a legacy and a tradition and a family that will have other expectations. But I want them to be able to carve out their own path. If it's the entertainment industry, great. And also good luck. There are so many people that will talk about what opened the doors for my children, but it takes talent and a lot of grit, which she did not have. For creating multidimensional, interesting, kind, creative people. That's who our kids are. Who I should also say said spend absolutely no time with their extended family, which could actually be good for their foundational development to have close family members, which they could a lot of. So I feel like, again, it's just one of those things where she's missing something so crucial and so simple and so profound that she's keeping her kids away from that. But again, back to the titles. What we do not need is a 19-year-old Lilibet doing a sex scene in a film going by Princess Lilibet Diana. Nope. No. Nobody needs that. Nobody needs that. Nobody wants that. Just Charles, say no. Say no. She mentions that the family might have different expectations. Like, well, not anymore. Really? You took them away from the UK. You're raising them in Hollywood. She contradicts what she said in her podcast on Tuesday, which is that she wanted her daughter to have an education. So which is it, Meghan? Do you want them to be in the entertainment industry, which does not value education? Or do you want them to go to university? Because those are, again, two different things. Now, you can do both, because Meghan did that, but she was a really crummy actress. And even if she says she majored in theater, I still have a hard time believing that to a certain extent, because she, as far as we know, she was not in any plays in college. I would love to see if somebody actually saw her in a play. If you have a script where she was in, even if it was a bit part, let me know. I'd love to actually know that, because I feel like that's kind of critical. But again, we don't need a actor, an actress, an actor Archie, an actress Lilibet going by prince and princess. We just don't need it. If that's where Harry and Meghan want their kids to go, and because they're being raised there, that's a higher probability. If you're raising your kids near that LA, if Meghan is still obsessed with that Los Angeles Hollywood image that she is, their kids are most likely going to be in the entertainment industry. So pump the brakes now, Charles. Just do it. Spare us all the grief, because it'll only go downhill from here. I love this one because she made kind of a boo-boo here, and it's kind of funny. What's one piece of advice you'd give an actor 100 years from now who is cast as Meghan? I hope that in preparing for that role, she finds the softness and playfulness and the laughter. Also probably the bullying, the narcissism, the isolation from family, friends, learning how to correctly Markle. That's a skill. The silliness. I just hope she finds the dimensions. Also, she can call me. Well, Meghan, in 100 years, honey, you will be dead. So yeah, she can't call you unless she's doing a seance. And then she, I guess, can call you. But again, she's trying to make herself sound relatable. She's soft, playful, silly. We haven't seen that much of that. And from what we heard from behind the scenes, you are none of those things. So regardless of what you tell us, you need to actually show us these things. It's not just, well, I went around and shook the hands of the crew. No, it needs to be deeper than that. She also said she went back to her high school and she lived up to this quote from Eleanor Roosevelt that said, "Women are like tea bags. They don't realize how strong they are until they're in hot water." Well, Meghan, you stepped your toe in hot water and you ran. You ran as fast as you could. So yeah, you didn't live up to the quote, not in the slightest. But again, you feel like she goes to this high school, she surprised people at a volleyball practice. I feel like she goes to places knowing or believing she'll get all this praise and accolade. She just needs people to pump her up by telling her how gorgeous and amazing she is. That's what I feel like she needs. That's why she does certain things. So I also thought it was interesting that she was asked one question, how important is it to you to be understood by other people? She's like, that's a great question. No one has ever asked me that. So again, I feel like that's a tinge of that manipulation we saw in our interview with Vanity Fair that was reported by Tom Bauer, and then in the Cut interview as well. She does this thing where she's kind of complimenting the writer, trying to kind of engage with them and being a little flirty. I think we get a smidge of that there. Could be reading too much into that though. She's asked, what is an average work day for you and Harry? I said on Twitter, let me get my Twitter and tell you what I said because I thought it was pretty good. What do they do all day? Sit around staring at their phones on their office thrones, finding every negative remark about them on social media and seeing what their PR team can do about it while the nannies care for the children. That would be my guess. That's what I guess they do all day. But apparently Harry's on a 24-hour schedule, you know, because some of his stuff is in the UK and they do Zoom calls and they work together. They work together. I feel like, again, through the Cut interview, we got this sense that their thrones are right next to each other, so they work together all the time. And I'm sorry, but there's something good about separation. My dad works from home, and sometimes my mom wishes he could go to the office. Just saying, just saying. Not that she doesn't love my dad, but it's that one thing, especially if you're an introvert, sometimes you just need the separation from people. And I think even extroverts, you need a bit of time away from your spouse because too much time sounds a lot more like Stockholm syndrome. I mean, granted, if you're a missionary and you live in a, remote place, you don't have too many people around you to a certain extent, but I digress. So this is the last question we get. Who takes the most snack breaks? Which is an inane question. An inane question. This is not a fun, inquisitive question. This is just a dumb question. It's funny. People sometimes think we live in Los Angeles, but we're a good 2 hours outside it. We're commuters. So that means they go to LA a lot. So I don't think they spend as much time with their kids as they think they do. We drove down recently for a day of back-to-back meetings, equipped with chocolate chip cookies the size of my toddler's hand. Also, my husband's favorite is In-N-Out. There's one at the halfway point between LA and our neck of the woods. It's really fun to go through the drive-thru and surprise them. They know our order. So I feel like it's weird because it's like we surprise them as if they're like, oh, it's Meghan and Harry. And then it's like they know our order. It's like, well, they're probably at this point like, hey, here's your order, bye. Again, I feel like this all comes back to is Meghan and Harry wanting to sound relatable. And if you're in California, hey, everybody goes to In-N-Out Burger. In-N-Out Burger is awesome. I love In-N-Out. Been there many, many times. Really, really enjoyed it. They're also in Texas, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. I think I could be wrong. So what are my final thoughts here? Well, I feel like I would love to know what the first draft of this was, because I bet you it was very different. I don't know what it is, but again, this seems like damage control. A lot of damage control. Trying to make Meghan Markle seem relatable. Trying to see, oh, she goes through an In-N-Out drive-through like everybody else. But of course, they know her and they know her orders, so that doesn't usually happen in most In-N-Out burgers. Oh, and here's the thing. In-N-Out menus are very simple. So they're basically a burger, and you can get one, two, or three patties. Fries, and there's like animal fries you can get too with like a queso sauce on it, I think, and stuff, I can't remember. You can get your burger wrapped in lettuce, but I like, and French fries. Like there's like 3 things on the menu, really. 3 or 4 things. Say 4, but it was really like 3, because it's like hamburgers, fries. So that's pretty much it. There's actually only really 2 things on the menu. I think you can get a grilled cheese. I think that's a thing. So it's a very, very small menu. So there's not like there's that much to really remember, because it's a very simple menu. And everybody loves In-N-Out Burger. But again, coming back to this, I think Meghan wants to make her, she's just an average nerdy mom. She's this, she's that. And again, I just don't feel like, at this point, the problem is though, I don't know what the real Meghan is. I don't know who the real Meghan is. We have no baseline to even know, is this the real Meghan? Is the cut the real Meghan? Is the Oprah Winfrey interview Meghan the real Meghan? Is the Duchess Meghan real Meghan? She's shown us so many different faces that it's hard to know what's authentic and what's not. And I think that's the true struggle Meghan and her team are having, is that nobody knows who she is. So that's why all these conspiracies pop up all the time, because she's made it so difficult to know who she actually is, because she's constantly changing based on what she thinks the public wants, what she needs, what narrative she's trying to drive. She's constantly changing herself. And granted, you evolve, but this is different than a person evolving. This is just something that's like, all of a sudden, I'm no longer the strong, confident woman that she portrayed in the cut. All of a sudden, I'm a nerdy housewife. I'm a nerdy mom. So it's just, again, this dichotomy and these 2 faces. Who's the real Meghan? I don't know. I have no idea who she is. And I doubt really Harry knew either until he married her. I just really, really doubt that, sadly. Just one last thing. When I was reading through this, what kind of struck me is I think Meghan is really in love with the idea of the story of her and Harry's love story. I don't think she's really in love with him or their relationship or their marriage. She's in love with the idea of what their love story is to her in her own mind. She thinks it's this huge, historic, groundbreaking, earth-shattering thing that she married Harry. And honestly, I don't think it is. Angela of Liechtenstein, who is a woman of mixed race descent from Panama, she married into the Liechtenstein royal family and nobody gave a hoot. And I always thought, maybe this is me and this is bad, I always thought anybody could marry into the British monarchy. I just didn't even think skin color would be an issue. I never did. So this idea in her mind, I think she's built it up so much that they have this grand love story. They've given up everything to be together. And I feel like every time I talk to her, Harry gets less and less important and she gets more and more grand in her own mind. And this love story is part of it, because he's not as much of a critical aspect of this story as she is, because she's the different one. She was the one who changed everything. And again, I feel like that's fundamentally both untrue and disingenuous. And I find it something that I just really don't like. It's kind of like a woman or a man who's more in love with what they believe their marital partner is going to be rather than who they actually are. Because I would bet, to a certain extent, Harry and Meghan are not getting along well behind the scenes. I think they're having money trouble. I think they're having business trouble. They're having family trouble. Harry, I'm sure his resentment that to a certain extent, because of her, he didn't get to visit his grandmother right before she passed away. I don't know if it was necessarily her decision or his decision or what, but if she played any role in the reason he didn't go, or that he was delayed in going on the day of her death, that resentment, if it's not there then now, it'll build over the years, over the decades, and it will, I think, end in bitterness, because She separated him from everything. He's given everything up to fulfill her dreams. And what happened to him in this process? I still don't know. I don't feel like there's been a very healthy aspect of this at all for Harry. So guys, let me know what you think on my theory. Thank you so much for watching. I know this was long, but I just found I was like, oh my gosh. And it wasn't quite as bad as the cut interview, but still, will the real Meghan Markle please stand up? So guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. And oh, if you need a palette cleanse, go to Royal Fashion News, check out my tiara video or any of the other videos. There's one of Meghan, you can just ignore it. Everything else is Meghan free, and you can just see beautiful jewelry, beautiful clothing, beautiful tiaras. It's just a wonderful, magnificent time. So guys, again, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.